climate change has some very, very significant risks to it. So even if we don't know for sure that those things are going to happen, if you don't plan and think about them, honestly, in my personal opinion, you're being negligent if you're not doing that. Okay, so that's sort of the big high-level picture. Let me step it down one slide, just one slide, and says, okay, so when you're actually talking to military leaders and they say, yeah, Titley, okay, I get all that high-level stuff. Now tell me specifically, what is it? And this is a slide that I've actually used in front of about 75 heads of the world's navies. The current Chief of Naval Operations of U.S. Admiral John Greenert asked me to come up to Newport and brief 75 of his closest friends, heads of most of the world's navies. This is actually the slide I used. One of the things, we talked about communication. I have climate on here only in one place, it's up in the header, but as far as the actual kind of the row headings, they're stuff that everybody can understand in the military. And then the column headings, they may or may not mean a whole lot to this audience, but they mean a ton to senior military leaders. Readiness. Readiness means not only do I have soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and I have all their equipment or toys, but they know how to use them. And they know how to use them when somebody's like shooting back at them, or it's a uncertain security situation. That doesn't just happen. You have to do a bunch of training to make that work. Are there going to be new missions? Are there going to be simply things that the militaries of the world are going to be called upon to do that we haven't even really thought of? And then capacity is, and I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. Do you have enough stuff to do the job? And then you can go through, where is things changing? Well, the Arctic is actually changing faster than anywhere else on the Earth. The Arctic ice, the sea ice, is both thinning and melting away. And we're looking at the Arctic, frankly, opening up here within a few decades, seasonally. You're still going to get ice in the winter for as long as all of us are still alive. But in the summer, probably starting in the 2020s at some point, you're going to start seeing basically no ice. First, it'll be for just a couple weeks, and then that time is, over time, is going to expand. So this is basically opening up the fifth ocean on Europe's northern frontier and on our northern frontier. And that changes not only things like oil and gas extraction, which if you think of the irony is this is kind of how the Arctic's melting in the first place. But be that as it may, the world may still decide to do that. Fishing, tourism, other mineral extraction, and even shipping routes. And it gets back to that very early slide I showed about the globalization. Because where are the warehouses of the world now? They're on ships. They're those container ships that are floating around. And if we start sending them over the top of the Arctic, one of the key things that the U.S. Navy has done, and the Royal Navy before that, is ensure the free flow of commerce so that our economies keep working so that we all have jobs still. So if that Arctic opens up, the navies better be able to operate up there. In addition to all that, who's heard of this guy, Vladimir Putin? Yeah, him. He's doing some kind of interesting stuff. He's not really happy with the sanctions we put on from Crimea and Ukraine. And he's basically said in the open press, it's like, okay, fine, I'll go build up my Arctic forces. What do you think about that, West? And he's doing that. Now, what are his intentions? We don't really know, but we sure see the capabilities of military forces coming back up in Russia. So all that human activity that's now coming up there, that's coming up. And now we may start adding back some of the old-fashioned, almost Cold War-like hard security issues between the West and Russia. It'll probably be different, it's never the same. But, the more you study Russia, the more it's really hard to say how that's going to work out. So, again, three things. It is a maritime environment for the Arctic. It's changing faster, as I said, than any place else, and it's not a vacuum. What happens in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic. It's not like Vegas. And that is true really both for the science. We're starting to see some evidence that the changes in the ice are affecting the weather, like here, like some of these really big snowy winters we've been having down in this part of the country, but also that geopolitical situation that I just talked about there. Here are the trade routes. This comes out of the U.S. Navy's Arctic Roadmap that came out last year. It's an update of the one that I did in 2009. You know, the blue is the Northwest Passage. We all read about the Northwest Passage in middle school and high school. Honestly, it's kind of like Route 66. You know, Route 66, sort of that mythical trade route, but not much goes on it now because it doesn't really exist. The dirty little secret about the Northwest Passage is it's shallow in places, so really big ships can't get through, and it's hard. It's a hard navigation detail because you get narrow passages, a lot of rocks, all that kind of stuff. So I don't think there's going to be a ton of traffic through the Northwest Passage. The Russians are pushing hard on that red line that goes across them. That's called the Northern Sea Route. But the real interesting one, if it opens up, is that green one. Open waters, international waters, deep waters, kind of over the top. And I'll tell you, if you go to Iceland and Reykjavik, they're like thinking about building a port to be the terminal for that. The Aleutians are kind of thinking about, hey, maybe Dutch Harbor, I can be a port. You would sort of run almost a connector service across the top of the world. That's what the shipping guys are thinking about, some of them. Others say it's never going to happen. I don't know. But I'll tell you, it's a lot of smart people with a lot of smart money are starting to really look at that. Okay, let's go talk about bases. I mentioned this readiness thing. You know, we don't just take soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines and just send them what we would call downrange. You know, the American way of war is we don't fight the home game, right? We want to fight the away game. We want to take, if there's bad guys, we don't want them here, we want them over there, and we'll go deal with them over there. And that's kind of what we do. But to make sure that all of our armed forces are ready, we got to train them someplace. We do that at our bases. So if you're the Navy and you're watching the sea level rise in Norfolk, as I showed you, that's a big issue. But it's not even just a sea level rise issue. It's issues like, I was talking to a friend of mine, Major General Mike Shields. He is the commander, or until 2 weeks ago, he was the commander of U.S. Army forces in Alaska. Forest fires are his issue. Not because his troops are being told to go fight forest fires, but massive forest fires, big respiratory issues, so you can't train as hard, you can't see, you have big visibility issues, you can't do all your training. And, you know, it's probably like almost everybody, like with your boss, when you're given a task, you're not says, you know, just take as long as you want. Nobody says that to you in the real world. It doesn't say that in the military. So you got to get people trained in a certain amount of time. We're having trouble with that now. So that's just some of the impacts on the bases there. You know, this is just some of the sea level rise in Bangladesh. This is basically, you know, about 5 feet, 6 feet. So 2 meters for those science folks. That's probably tens of millions of people that will be affected. Where are they going to go? Are they going to stay in Bangladesh? Are they going to try to go someplace else? We don't know. From a military point of view, anybody know where this is? Diego Garcia, all right. You get a, I'll cut 5 minutes off. There's my present to everybody. Okay, we'll shorten this. Yeah, exactly. It's Diego Garcia. It turns out it's a British island, British Indian Ocean territories. The Brits let us do whatever we want as long as we're nice to the seabirds and the turtles there. So we're nice to the seabirds and the turtles. It turns out that probably every significant Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Defense military operation in the Southwest Asia area, this is a key base. And it's only about 6 or 7 feet above water. So again, if we lose that, that changes kind of everything as far as how we in the Department of Defense have thought about supporting our operations in that incredibly important part of the world. It's not just a U.S. issue, or a foreign issue. I mean, this is a little bit different. This is a picture of how many people are within basically about 3.5 feet of high tide. And you can kind of see where the hot spots are: Florida, New Orleans, Sacramento Delta. You know, a lot of people think about the East Coast and the Gulf Coast, but the Sacramento Delta has got a sea level rise issue too. You know, and of course, up as we get up towards here, towards Long Island, and everybody, of course, saw what happened in Sandy there. So, you know, we've got a lot of people in this country that are going to have to deal with this issue. Okay, I'm going to go on. I'm going to skip disaster relief in the interest of time. I'll talk about just some of these higher order security threats, these so-called catalysts for conflict. You know, and it's driven, and I hope people won't tell you that like climate change caused the Arab Spring or climate change caused ISIS. That's way, way too simplistic and honestly can't be proven. But I think what you can see, this is just a drought index where sort of reds are bad and greens are okay. You kind of see how we see a lot of drying out coming in the next few decades. Look at the northern coast of Africa, the Mediterranean, eastern Mediterranean, like where Syria is. And then what you start seeing is this whole drought and instability in Syria. So, but it goes back like decades. So you had Assad, 1970s. His idea was, we're going to be self-sufficient. So what does he do? He starts using tons of water from the rivers and from the aquifers. And hey, while it's there, you can do it. And he was self-sufficient. Everybody gives him the high five. That's wonderful. You get some droughts. Then you get the Iraq War. You dump 1 million refugees into Syria. That really strains the thing. Remember, we're talking Syria. How great is the governance in Syria? Yeah, not so good. And then you get a really, really bad drought starting in the middle of the last decade, which probably has a pretty big climate fingerprint on it. We can talk about why that is in Q&A if anybody's interested. But that then dumps about 750,000 additional people into the cities. Basically farmers who literally could not grow anything because there was no water, and everything breaks. There is no social services, it's crappy governance, it's Assad, it's Syria. And the whole thing collapses. And out of that comes ISIS. So is ISIS predictable? No. But you could see that you were accreting risk upon risk. And one of the big risks was the fact that you had this drought and the farmers had nowhere to go. And then when they went to the cities, it's not like anybody was taking care of them. So you have these conditions for tremendous social instability, and off to the races you go. And we happen to get ISIS out. So if anybody's ever done like accident or investigations or read accident investigations like of a modern jetliner, I mean, almost always nowadays, it's not like, oh, one cause, but it's this and this and this and this, and it's these chains of events. And like if you're in the accident prevention business, you look at how do you break those chains? And climate change becomes one of those links in that chain. And if we don't break it, then you keep on going, and you can have these catastrophic results like we're seeing in Syria, the fertile crescent right now.